YouTube viewers. Today we're going to continue with our in-depth look at the audio cards by looking at the HF driver card. I'm going to give you some information regarding biasing so you could better understand the card and the magnetic tape recording process in general. So, without further ado, let's take a look at the HF driver card. This is the HF driver board. I'll explain exactly how this works and functions of it, but first I think it would be wise to talk about bias. So here's a little side note about bias. In magnetic tape recording, bias refers to a technique used to improve the fidelity of audio or data signals recorded on the magnetic tape. Without bias, the recording would suffer from significant distortion, noise, and non-linearity due to the magnetic properties of the actual recording medium. So here's how bias works in a magnetic tape recording. Magnetic tape consists of a thin plastic strip coated with tiny magnetic particles, usually iron oxide or chromium dioxide. During the recording, the tape moves past the recording head, which generates a magnetic field. This field aligns the magnetic particles on the tape to store the audio signal. However, the magnetic particles have a threshold which they do not magnetize properly. If the audio signal alone is applied to the tape on particularly weak signals, the response of the tape can be erratic or nonlinear. This nonlinearity leads to distortion in the recording, especially for lower volume levels, quiet passages and stuff. Now, to overcome this nonlinearity, a high-frequency bias signal, typically above the range of human hearing, like 40 kHz to 150 kHz, is added to the audio signal. The bias signal essentially lifts the recording process into the more linear region of the tape's magnetic response curve. When the audio signal is combined with the high-frequency bias signal, the magnetic tape responds more predictably. It helps to smooth out the irregularities and reduce distortion. The bias doesn't affect the audio signal itself because it's outside the audible range, but ensures that the tape response to the audio is more consistent and accurate. Now, there was two types of bias. AC bias, which is the most commonly used method, where a high-frequency alternating current, AC, signal is added to the audio, results in a cleaner, more accurate recording. There was DC bias in some early recording systems, which is direct current, but it was less effective and produced lower quality recordings with more noise and distortion. Now, the amount of bias applied needs to be carefully controlled. Too little bias results in distortion, which is the underbias condition, while too much bias will reduce the high-frequency response and induce noise, which is an overbias condition. Proper calibration of bias levels is essential to achieve the best sound quality from the recording. Now let's summarize this. The bias in magnetic tape recording is a high-frequency signal added to the audio signal to overcome the nonlinear behavior of the magnetic tape. Helps reduce distortion, increases fidelity, ensures that even quiet sounds are captured accurately. Okay, let's go back and take a look at the HF driver board. A clock frequency of 307.2 kHz is fed into this card from the MPU card in the front card cage. This frequency is then buffered by IC12 and then divided in half by IC13 to 153.6 kHz, which is the bias and erase frequency. This then is fed into IC15, which drives the transformer T2. One of the secondary windings of T2 feeds T1, which drives directly into the erase head. The other winding provides bias to the record head. Now the rest of this card is pretty complicated, and I'm not going to bore you with it, except to say that data coming into the card from the front card cage controls the amount of bias current and erase current that feeds the erase and record heads. The HX Pro circuit is involved in this so that if HX Pro is on, it will also regulate that bias current being fed to the record head. In layman's terms, just understand that this card produces a 153.6 kilohertz sine wave that's both the bias voltage that runs on top of the audio being recorded and the sine wave that drives the erase head. Well, I hope you enjoyed that video and learned a little bit about magnetic tape recording. Next week, we're going to dive into the noise reduction system, so you won't want to miss that. And if you haven't subscribed, I ask that you would please do that because it greatly helps. Give a thumbs up if you really enjoyed it, and if you want to be notified when new content comes out, ring the bell icon. Thanks again, and we'll see you soon.